But if you look at the way that this unfolded, President Putin made a desperate effort to stop the march towards war. Back in December of 2021, he went so far as to put specific written proposals on the table with NATO, peace proposals, to defuse what was coming about. Because at this point, Ukraine was massing troops to attack the Donbass. So he was trying to head this off. He didn't want war. And NATO just blew it off, just dismissed it, never took it seriously, never went into serious negotiations. At that point, Putin, seeing that armed Ukrainians with weapons to kill Russian troops were literally on their borders, decided he had to strike first. Now you could see that this was not some pre-planned attack. This was not like Hitler's attack into Poland, where the standard rule of thumb is that you always have a 3-to-1 advantage when you are the attacker. You have to mass 3 times as many tanks and artillery and planes and men as the other side has. In fact, when Russia went in, they went in sort of with what they had, what they could cobble together on short notice, and they were outnumbered by the Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainian forces had about 250,000. The Russians had perhaps 160,000. So instead of having 3 times as many, they actually had fewer troops than the Ukrainians, but they were forced to attack to try to preempt the battle that was looming, where the Ukrainians had massed these forces against the Donbass. Now, the Donbass is adjacent to Russia. It is a portion of Ukraine that did not join with the revolutionary government that conducted the coup in 2014 and overthrew the government of Ukraine. They refused to become a part of the new revolutionary government of Ukraine. And so they declared their independence. And Ukraine had massed this enormous army to attack against the Donbass. And so Russia was forced to go in to preempt that planned attack by Ukraine. And you could see that Russia very much hoped that they could conduct this special operation without unduly causing casualties for the Ukrainians, because they think of the Ukrainians, or at least they did think of the Ukrainians as brother Slavs, that they wanted to have good relations. But there was a famous picture with a Russian tank that had been stopped by a gathering of maybe 40 civilians who just walked out in the road and blocked the road, and the tank stopped. I can tell you, in Vietnam, if we had a bunch of people who stood in the way of an American tank going through, that tank would not have slowed down in the slightest. It wouldn't have honked a horn. It wouldn't have done anything. Wouldn't have fired a warning shot. It would have just gone on. And I think that's more typical. I'm not criticizing the Americans. I was there and I was fighting, and I probably would have driven the tank straight through myself. But what I'm saying is that the rules of engagement for the Russians were very, very cautious. They didn't want to create a great deal of hatred and animosity. The Russians did not go in. They did not bomb the electrical system, the media systems, the water systems, all of these, the bridges and so forth. They tried to retain the infrastructure of Ukraine in good shape because they wanted it to get back. They just wanted this to be over with and get back to normal. It didn't work. The Ukrainians, the resistance was unexpectedly hard. The Ukrainian soldiers fought with great valor, great heroism, and so now the game has been upped and it's become much more serious. But it is amazing to look and to see that Russia dominates the air. They haven't knocked out the train systems. They haven't knocked out power plants. They haven't knocked out so many things. They've never bombed the buildings in the center of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. They haven't bombed the buildings where the parliament meets. They've been incredibly reserved about these things, hoping against hope that peace could be achieved. But I don't think Ukraine has anything to do with the decision about peace or war. I think the decision about peace or war is made in Washington, D.C. As long as we want the war to continue, we will fight that war using Ukrainians as proxies, and we will fight it to the last Ukrainian death.
How do you project the potential of a war breaking out directly between the United States and Russia, and what would that be like?
You know, if you go back to the First World War in 1914, you had the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. He and his wife were killed. As a result of those two people being killed, you had a domino effect of all of these alliances and anger and media hysteria. And before it was over, I think it was 14 million people had been killed. It's always hard to get true numbers, but anyway, it was an enormous number of millions of people who died as a result of that. We need to recognize the risk of playing these games of chicken, where, for example, the Turkish armed forces or the Turkish media just published an article saying that they're at Mariupol, where there was a great siege that the Russians ultimately won. The one area they haven't taken over is this tremendous steel plant. There are a lot of Ukrainian soldiers who are holed up there. And now it has come to light that apparently there are 50 French senior officers who are trapped in that steel plant along with the Ukrainians. The French soldiers have been on the ground fighting, directing the battle, and this was kept under wraps, ultra secret, because of the French elections that just occurred. Had the French people known that there were a large number of French officers trapped and probably going to die in that steel plant, the elections would have gone the other way. Marine Le Pen would have won. And so it was very important that for the entire deep state that it not come to light that these French officers were there. We know that there are NATO officers who are present on the ground in Ukraine as advisors and so forth. we run the risk. Now, my guess is, and this is a guess, I could be wrong, but the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva, was sunk as a result of being struck by anti-ship missiles. My guess is that those missiles, I think there's a good chance they were fired by the French. Now I could be wrong, but those missiles are so ultra sensitive and so dangerous to our ships that I don't think that NATO would trust the missiles to Ukrainians or to anybody else. I think they have to be maintained under NATO control and operation. So I think that it was probably NATO forces that actually sunk the Moskva. And you can see we're taking these very reckless actions. And each time we sort of up the ante, we have two Republican, I happen to be Republican, but two Republican US senators who have said that, well, we might just need to use nuclear weapons against Russia. That is insane. I think it's important that people begin to discuss what a thermonuclear war would mean. Russia is roughly comparable to the United States in nuclear power. They have hypersonic missiles that we do not have, that can absolutely evade any detection, any timely detection, and they can fire missiles from Russia and reach San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., New York City. Probably New York City itself, not only would everybody be killed, but it would probably be impossible for people to inhabit New York City for hundreds of years afterwards. That not only would it cease to be a place of vibrant human life, but probably going out for, maybe half a millennium, it would not recover any sort of civilization. We need to understand the gravity of what we're doing. Perhaps if it were a matter of life and death for the United States, what happens in Ukraine, that would be one thing. Certainly when the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba that targeted the United States, that was worth taking the risk because it was right on our border and it threatened us, and it was a battle worth fighting for and a risk worth taking. The Russians are in exactly the mirror image of that situation, because for them, the life of Russia depends on stopping NATO from advancing further right into Ukraine, right to their borders. They cannot afford not to fight this war. They cannot afford not to win this war. So I think toying with this constant escalation in a war that really, in a place that has no significance to Americans, Ukraine is meaningless to Americans. It has no impact on our day-to-day lives, and yet we're playing this reckless game that risks the lives of all people in the United States and Western Europe for nothing, just absolutely for nothing.